Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be tackling something that's not just some boring textbook term, but like a real living framework that shapes how India functions. Federalism.
It is.
And we're making this deep dive especially relevant for you, considering your aspirations for the Indian civil service.
Yeah, it's a topic that goes way beyond definitions,
Right.
Understanding how federalism works, especially in a place like India, is crucial for anyone, really.
Absolutely.
But especially for someone aiming to serve in the government.
Exactly. And you've clearly been doing your homework. The readings you shared comparing federal and unitary systems, plus that deep dive into the Indian model.
Yeah.
Those are excellent starting points.
Those are great.
So let's unpack these together.
Let's get started.
So first things first, when you hear federalism, what comes to mind? For someone who's like new to this, what's the elevator pitch?
It's all about dividing power.
Right.
Think of it like in a family, right?
Yeah.
Parents have some responsibilities, children have others, and sometimes they share decisions.
Right.
Federalism is kind of like that,
Okay.
dividing power between a central government
Okay.
and regional government.
So it's not just about geography then,
No.
but about like who gets to make decisions on what.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Now, how is that different from a unitary system?
So in a unitary system, imagine the parents having all the authority
Okay.
and the children having very little say.
Okay.
All power flows from the central government.
Got it.
Countries like the UK and France are examples of this.
Got it. So federalism is like a power-sharing arrangement,
Yeah,
while a unitary system is more top-down.
precisely. And the sources you shared, they highlight that India
Right.
very deliberately chose the federal path.
Yes.
But there's a twist, isn't there?
Right. The source mentions India as a union of states, not just a federation.
Right.
Why is that distinction important, especially for someone who's prepping for the UPSC?
Well, that wording is crucial.
Okay.
Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, one of the architects of our Constitution, he emphasized that union of states signifies that Indian states don't have the right to secede. This sets us apart from, say, the U.S.,
Okay.
where states joined through an agreement.
Ah. So it's about the very foundation of how the nation is structured.
Yeah,
No breaking away from the union.
exactly. And here's another interesting point. The source repeatedly mentions that India follows the Canadian model of federalism.
3 times.
That's no coincidence.
Okay, that's definitely a hint.
Pay close attention to that for the exam.
What's so special about the Canadian model, and how does it apply to India?
Both Canada and India lean towards a strong central government.
Okay.
Unlike the U.S., where states have more autonomy,
Okay.
it's about balancing regional interests with national unity.
So strong central government. What else makes the Indian system distinctly federal?
Well, we see several classic features in action.
Yeah.
Dual polity, a written constitution, the division of powers, supremacy of the constitution, a rigid constitution, an independent judiciary, and bicameralism.
Wow, that's a mouthful. Let's break those down one by one, starting with dual polity.
Sure.
Sounds very textbooky. Can we make it more relatable?
Absolutely. Think of it like two sets of parents working together.
Okay.
The central government, like maybe the grandparents,
Okay.
focuses on bigger issues that affect everyone. Defense, foreign relations, the economy.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So who are the other parents in this scenario?
That would be the state governments.
Okay.
They're closer to you, handling things like local law and order, education, healthcare.
Right.
Things that directly impact your daily life.
Got it. So it's about different levels of government looking after different aspects of our lives.
Exactly. And to avoid confusion, there's a written constitution, which is like a rule book. It's incredibly detailed, the longest in the world.
Wow.
And it lays out everything structure of the government, powers, and limitations,
Okay.
both for the center and the states.
And that's where those lists come in: union list, state list, concurrent list. What are those all about?
Think of them as menus. The union list has items the central government exclusively controls,
Right.
like defense.
Uh-huh.
The state list covers things where states have the main, say, like police powers.
Okay.
The concurrent list is where things get interesting.
Okay.
Both levels can make laws,
Uh-huh.
but the central law usually overrides.
Ah, so there's a hierarchy even within this power-sharing system.
Exactly. And to ensure no one oversteps the Constitution reigns supreme.
Right.
It's the ultimate authority.
Yeah.
Any law, whether from the center or a state, cannot contradict the Constitution.
And if there's a disagreement, who steps in to resolve it?
That's where the independent judiciary comes in.
Okay.
They're like the referees, interpreting the Constitution and making sure everyone plays by the rules.
So it's not just about dividing power, but also about having a system to resolve disputes.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Now, what about this rigid constitution idea? Why is it so hard to change?
Think of it as a safeguard.
Okay.
Changing the Constitution, especially the parts about federalism, needs a supermajority in Parliament
Okay.
and approval from half the states.
Wow.
This prevents any one group from easily grabbing more power.
It's like a safety mechanism to protect the balance.
Makes sense. Okay, we've covered a lot. What's this bicameralism thing you mentioned?
That refers to India having two houses of parliament.
Yeah.
The Lok Sabha representing the people directly, and the Rajya Sabha representing the states.
Right.
Think of it as giving states a voice at the national level.
So it's a way to make sure states' concerns are heard when making national laws.
Precisely. It's another layer of checks and balances within the federal system.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here, but hold on. The source also mentions something called unitary features of the Indian Constitution. I thought we were talking about federalism.
And this is where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
India's system isn't purely federal. It incorporates elements of both federalism and a unitary system,
Interesting.
making it incredibly unique.
Wait, so it's like a hybrid? Exactly. And that's what we'll dive into next. Think of it as a delicate dance, between giving power to the states and ensuring the nation stays strong and unified.
Okay.
It's designed to fit India's specific needs.
Right, you've piqued my curiosity.
Yeah.
Let's unpack these unitary features. What makes India's system lean towards the center?
Well, for starters, remember those lists of powers we discussed?
Right.
The union list, which is the center's domain,
Yeah.
actually has more subjects than the state list.
Okay.
And not just any subjects. The big ones like defense, foreign affairs, and currency, all controlled by the central government.
So the center gets to call the shots on the things that really matter at a national level.
That's exactly. Plus, there's the concept of residual powers.
Okay.
These are the subjects not specifically listed anywhere. In India, those go straight to the center, unlike in the U.S. where states get them.
Interesting. So it's not a perfectly even split of powers even on paper.
Right.
The center has a clear advantage.
Right. And here's another key difference. In India, states aren't indestructible. The central government can actually change a state's boundaries, rename it, or even split it into multiple states.
Wait, really? The center can just redraw the map? That seems like a lot of power.
It is, and it only needs a simple majority vote in Parliament, not the supermajority needed for constitutional amendments.
Okay.
So in certain situations, the center can act pretty decisively.
That definitely tilts the balance away from a purely federal system.
It does. Another key feature is the single constitution.
Right.
In some federations, states have their own constitutions on top of the national one. But in India, we all operate under one overarching constitution.
So that's like a unified framework for the whole country.
Exactly. Now, we also talked about the constitution being rigid, right?
Yeah.
But here's the twist. It's also quite flexible in some areas.
Wait, how can it be both rigid and flexible?
Think of it as having strong foundations but adaptable walls.
Okay.
Many parts of the Constitution can be amended by Parliament, and the central government gets to initiate these changes.
So while the basic structure is protected, there's room for evolution and adaptation as needed.
Precisely. Let's revisit the Rajya Sabha for a moment.
Okay.
Remember, it's the House that represents states. But unlike the U.S. Senate, where each state gets equal representation, in India, representation is based on population.
So larger states have more sway.
Yes. States like Uttar Pradesh, with their huge populations, have a much stronger voice compared to smaller states like Sikkim. This, again, is a departure from a strict federal model, where states, regardless of size, have equal weight.
I see how that could be a point of contention. Smaller states might feel their interests are not given enough consideration.
It's a valid concern and part of the ongoing debate about how power is balanced in India.
Right.
And speaking of central power, we can't forget about the emergency provisions.
What are those and why are they important, especially for someone interested in public service?
The Constitution allows the central government to declare a state of emergency, national, state level, or financial, in specific situations.
Okay.
During an emergency, the balance of power shifts dramatically. The center essentially takes control and state governments become subordinate.
Wow, so federalism can practically be suspended?
Yes. During an emergency, it becomes a much more unitary system with the center calling the shots.
Okay.
This is a powerful tool and a key difference from classic federalism. It's definitely something to remember for the UPSC exam.
So with these strong centralizing features, some might argue that India is more unitary than federal.
Right.
Is that a valid perspective?
There's a lot of debate among experts about how to classify India's system. Some scholars, like Casey, call it quasi-federal,